camera.
This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook, and we're at the 2019 UIC Medical Cannabis Symposium. I'm here speaking with Andrew Kavasilas.
Yes.
Kavasilas.
Kavasilas.
I say it wrong every time.
That's all right.
Andrew, you're the Secretary of the Australian Hemp Party.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that history.
Well, the Hemp Party's been going for a couple of decades now. Again, it's been that one voice where, cannabis law reforms have always been espoused and brought forward. And yeah, what we're seeing now is a lot of other parties starting to take on a lot of the arguments that we put forward, seeing other parties really take control of that. But we still keep an eye on it. There's parties obviously that will say stuff nowadays around medical cannabis, which are quite populist, but they have no way of getting it up. Whereas with the hemp party, we're intricately aware of why it's not legal and the kind of steps that we'd need to do here in Australia that we would need to do to get medical cannabis going here in Australia.
And around that era when, or some time ago when you were in politics, if you like, what have you got, 5% of the vote?
Or? Oh, the last 2016 election, yeah. The Hemp Party, we ran up in the NT as well and got 5%, which is the biggest margin we've ever got. That's primary votes, yeah.
So that speaks something of the acceptance of cannabis in the Australian community.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the NT, we sort of look at the demographics of the NT, so you have a lot of younger folk, and so, yeah, that kind of vote is representative of the electorate, I suppose. But nowadays, I think at the next election, we're going to have 4 or 5 parties saying that they're all for medical cannabis. But I think, it's about time the Hemp Party were the ones who really ushered it in. Yeah.
Forgive me for saying this, but when you get politicians saying they're all for, I noticed that you use quotation marks.
Oh, yeah.
Why would they have to if they're really for it?
Politicians come and go. That's what we've noticed over the decades. I think I'm on my 13th health minister, and they all come along with that same kind of story. Yeah, they're all for it. The ones who are most for it, obviously, are the ones in opposition. They're all for it when they're in opposition, then they get in, and it turns out they can't do it, or we're not able to, or they're just not able to. That's the fact of it. This is at a state level, it's definitely all smoke and mirrors. At the federal level, there's still some smoke and mirrors there, but it really is an international issue.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, where do you think it should be handled, state, federally, or internationally?
It's a federal issue that our federal government has to take up with the United Nations, with the International Narcotic Control Board, with the people who run the medical sort of establishment throughout the whole world. The fact is, no government in the world has willingly introduced a meaningful medical cannabis regime that we're talking about here now. So we really are floundering at the moment where the government's trying to introduce a full pharmaceuticalised cannabinoid medicine regime and forgetting about the actual medical cannabis that's going on around the country and around the world.
But we've spoken about this with other people about the breadth of chemical constituents in cannabis and the varying actions that they have. Would it be better to have a drug where you had just THC, just CBD, just maybe a group of terpenoids or something for various conditions?
No, because it's been shown it doesn't work, whether it was marinol, dronabinol, sesamet. There's been a string of individual cannabinoids, and even, when people go to the web and have a look at, 146 studies that show that cannabis cures cancer, a lot of those were individual cannabinoids in a test tube. Yeah. It really is a very big difference from oral dosing, a whole cannabinoid, whole extract, or full spectrum. So I think that's what's confounding the medical establishment, which in turn is keeping our politicians hamstrung on this. Yeah.
So what sort of changes have you seen, particularly since the opening up of the SAS scheme to access cannabis products?
Well, the kind of things I've seen personally is that a lot more people are hearing that medical cannabis is safe and they're turning to it. A majority of those people are turning to the black market. We find a new cohort of patients now.
Why? Why are they turning to the black market?
It's cheaper, easier to get. They get more explanation from somebody with a lot of experience with cannabis, and just the cost.
About issues though with the black market, you know, I've heard, for instance, hydroponics and things like that are of great concern.
Yeah.
There's no control of, you know, heavy metals or pesticide residues in the plant.
Pretty
what
much,
about those sort of things?
That's the same as what happened in California back in 1996. There wasn't those checks and balances. The market decides though, if a dispensary was continually offering, you know, substandard cannabis that was heavily laden with nutrients and so forth, well, they're not going to buy it. There's people in California and other states in the US that just go to somewhere else that is selling something more acceptable. I think here in Australia, we have to watch out when we say hydroponic and indoors. Look, in Canada and the US and the Netherlands, it's all indoors. Right. There is no outdoor that whether it's the climate or whatever. But no, you'd have to say the majority of people using cannabis in the world for medical uses is grown indoors, hydroponically if you want, yeah, but that's how it is.
But would we have to in Australia? I understand that we have the perfect climate to be able to grow it outdoors if only it was legal.
Look, you grow into black market specifications like that.
Right.
I think when you get the government involved in putting a Narcotics Act out with amendments to allow for medical cannabis use in a more pharmaceutical, it will be indoors, just like they are in Canada and the US and the Netherlands. Most people in the world are smoking indoor cannabis. I think that's
even where it's legal.
Even here in Australia, yeah. Most outdoor cropping went out long ago. You know, I mean, most cannabis in Australia, perhaps 80 or 90% of the Australian clip is indoor now. It's like moonshine. You know, why would you bother making beer or wine when you can just grow indoor? The big problem is because we are growing to black market specs, we're growing in a black market area, you know, it's like moonshine. People want more bang for their buck, and it's the same for the producer. So whether they're using chemicals and heavy nutrient loads and plant hormone regulators and things like that, that's the stuff that can be stamped out when we legalise it. Yeah. And then outdoors as well. I mean, you know, if I've got sick parents or whatever, and you know, there's a choice of an indoor and outdoor. I mean, you know, I think the government made a really good point about, you know, what about if a bird poos all over your crop? You know, it's really hard to get that out. And so, yeah, I think, you know, into the future, there shouldn't, you know, unless people want to grow their own at home, that's fine. But, you know, if you're actually buying it, yeah, you do want to know that it's grown indoors, there's no contamination, you're going to have a consistent crop year after year, a consistent product. So I think there is really that two-speed thing that we've got to, you know, take into account.
As leader or secretary of the Australian Hemp Party and having dealt with politicians, a lot of politicians in your time,
yeah.
What can you tell us about the acceptance or the lobbying for the changes in the criminality of cannabis, whether you know, some politicians either using it or a family member is using medicinal cannabis. What's been your exposure to that?
Oh, I mean, right from the start, I suppose, when politicians got involved. We're in New South Wales, and back in the early 2000s, the Premier at the time, Bob Carr, you know, that government really pushed hard. I think there was reported like this, 4 members of cabinet at the time who's had family members using cannabis for medical purposes. So the politicians want to do it. When you get those politicians who are really out there saying yes, they want to do it, they do want to do it. But when you hear people like, well, then it gets to the health ministers. And yes, they're saying they want to do it, but it's just not happening. But that's reflective of the rest of the world. No government has willingly done it. So, you know, we're working here under the assumption here in Australia that the rest of the world has left the door open for Australian companies to sort of stroll up and make all these products and export them and everything. Where, you know, the truth of the matter is a long way from that, yeah.
So in a perfect world, what changes would you like to see tomorrow, please?
Oh, well, in a perfect world, you know, just a proper regulated approach to cannabis, you know. It turns out it's not as bad as what they say. It's very, very handy for medical benefits for all sorts of conditions, where even without claiming you can cure anything as a medicine, as a you know, a product with agents that can help the human body. I think there's kind of nothing better. Controls will be needed, especially when it comes to, growing it in supplying it in any clinical form. You're going to want the back end of that if everything was good. People want to grow it at home, which has been going on for 70 or thousands of years. It's still not that bad. It's still not that dangerous. So if people want to use it at home, grow it themselves, and forego the quality check, the cannabinoid profiling, the actual dosing, and all of that. People get used to it themselves. Yeah.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today. We could talk for hours.
We could. Thanks very much, Andrew.
Thank you so much. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook, and the camera's gone.